All right, let's continue with descriptive statistics. So there are some criteria that we can use for our data in order to summarize it better. When you use summary of your data, it will be much easier to analyze your data. So data summary is very important in statistics. And there are some criteria, as I mentioned, like mean, median, quantiles, quartiles, and so on. So today we are going to focus on them and talk about them in details. Like sample mean. You should distinguish sample mean with population mean right away. When we talk about sample mean, we are talking about X bar. It means that you had a population, you took a sample from it. Now, X bar is the average of your data in your sample. But mean of the population is usually the value that you don't have, and you use X bar in order to predict it. So here, as you can see, these are the data in your sample. What is n here? Xn is an index here for showing that xn is the last data that you have in your sample, and here n is the size of your sample. Like how many data do you have in your sample? So you simply get the average of this data and make it equal to x bar, and we call it sample mean. And here it is mentioned that it is an unbiased estimator. To show that an estimator is biased or not, you can use this formula. It means that you get the expected value of those statistics. For example, here is just one statistic, and then find out that whether it is equal to the population parameter or not. In order to make it clear for you, let me show you like this. Okay, so we have a population and it has a parameter mean of the population. So I want to check whether mu is equal to expected values of X bars. What does it mean? It means that you took all possible samples that you can possibly take. Even some of them may have intersections. So you can take all the possible samples. Like you can also mention what's the size of your sample. All possible samples of size 5, for example. Then the expected value of that, it means that expected value of X bars, even I can give it an index so that I show they are not just one, like in this case, it apparently it seems like that. So it means that it's equal to mu. So that's the correct way to show that. Well, anyway, this is out of the scope of this study to have proof for example, whether an estimator is biased or not. Usually we ask such questions from statisticians. So what you should know is that we use this formula anyway in order to show whether the estimator is biased or not. Another thing that we pay attention is consistency. And to show that, you can show that the probability of the statistic, the difference between a statistic and your parameter, when you consider it greater than very small number, does it tend to zero? When it happens, when the sample size is big enough. So it's here, it shows that it goes to infinity. But if it is not the case, then you cannot say that this estimator is consistent. So here, sampling error, when we talk about sampling error, it means that we are talking about this absolute value. So this one should converge to zero when the sample size is big enough. If that's the case, then this is consistent. So again, this is not the thing that we concern about for our course. But anyway, it's nice to know because when we want to find an estimation, so it's important to know what's the nature of that. Okay, so what was sample variance since we are talking about descriptive statistics? So as we said, in our population, we have parameters like mu and variance. So when you get a sample, you are also interested to calculate variance of the sample. So you can calculate it by using this formula. Okay. And you see here, for each one of your data, you subtract it from the mean of the sample, not the population. Okay. This is related to your sample. So each one of the data, the difference of that by your mean, and power each one by 2, get the summation, and finally divide it by 1 over n minus 1. And because of that, you can have an unbiased estimator. The proof won't be our concern for this course, but it's nice to know anyway. You can take a look in your book if you are interested. But it's also related to degree of freedom. I will talk about degree of freedom in details later. What you should be careful about is that this value that you divide this expression by is different in your population, because here you are considering the sample size minus 1, but when you want to calculate variance of the population, take a look at this one. For usually the size of population, I can show it by capital N, not lowercase n. And here we have again summation starting from 1 to capital N. And here we will have xi minus, here instead of x bar, I should have the parameter, mean of the population, and power it by 2. So if you compare these two together, you will see there is one difference here, here, and also here for x bar. So you should be careful about the way that you calculate each one of them. The formula is different. So sample size denoted by lowercase n, and use capital N for population. There's another central criteria. So far, for central criteria, you are familiar with mean of the sample. And another one can be mentioned is mode. The data with the most frequency in your data set, we can call it a mode. Like, let's say this is our data set. Okay, so you have 7 number of data, and if I ask you what's the mode, you will find the data with the most frequency. As you can see, 5 has the most frequency. It happened 3 times. So the frequency of 5 is 3. Frequency of 2 is 2, because it happened to be here in our data set twice. The same I could say for number 3, that it happened twice. So 3 is more than other ones, like F3 is 2. So when it happens, then you say, okay, 5 is our mode. Don't say 3, because 5 happened 3 times. So we use just this value to compare it with others. So what if we had another 3 here? Then we would have 2 modes, because here the frequency of number 3 would be, sorry, this is number 2 actually. Let's say this is number 3, forget about this part. So here we have 3 times 3 and 3 times 5. Then your mode will be both 5 and 3, okay? And what if all of your data set contains the same value like this? Then in that case, you say this data set has no mode, okay? So it's very easy to find mode, and also I will show you when you summarize your data, it can be even easier than this. So what about another central criteria named median? For median, it is useful because sometimes our data set has outliers at and this one can negatively affect your mean. And when I say negatively, it means that your central criteria is not meaningful that much, because you cannot refer it and may actually use it like this is the best central criteria. For having the best information about your data in the level of summarizing your data, it's the best if you increase the number of central criteria, and when you have all the information about it, then you can have better understanding about your data. Like you have X bar and you have your median. Usually we show it with capital M. Then if you have both of them, information of both of them, and you will have better understanding of your data. But what is a median? So when we talk about median, it means that 50% of the data is less than that value. It means that, for example, if I say we are talking about height of students, and 165 centimeter is the average of students. When I talk about median, I say 160 centimeter is the median of the height of students in that sample. It means that 50% of students have heights lower. Yeah, it means that smaller values for the height for 160 centimeters, and half of the students have higher value for that. It means that half of the students are shorter, half of the students are taller. So when you have information like this, like 160 centimeters for median and 165 for the mean, then you understand most probably in this class we have some tall students who could be considered as outliers. Sometimes even one student could have such effect on your mean. Like one student is very tall, like 210 centimeters. Then because of this student, you can see the mean of the sample was greater than the median. So it's, both of them are nice to know about. That's why whenever you have a data set, it's nice to calculate both of them in order to have better understanding about your data set. It's not like one of them is useless, the other one is more useful. Both of them can be useful at the same time. Now, when we talk about median, we also use box plots. I will show you about box plot in details. Even in tutorial, we will practice with it. That perfectly, we can use such criteria in order to summarize our data, and also IQR, and I will explain about it in details, that why they are important. So in this picture, you can see when you have information about both mean and median, what happens in your distribution. So when it happens that mean and median are exactly the same, then it shows that your distribution is symmetric. Do you remember normal distribution? It was symmetric, and it is very useful when a distribution is symmetric, because in terms of probabilities, it's much easier to calculate it by using cumulative probabilities. But what if mean of the population is bigger than median of the population? Now I'm talking about population, you see. So when this is the case, then we can say this is right skewed, or it is skewed to the right. It means that here 50% of your data is less than this value, your median, but you can see that mean is bigger, like the previous slide that I showed you. One, maybe some outliers we have here, and because of them, this mean of a population is bigger than median. So it is skewed to the right. Or vice versa case, you can have skewed to the left. Okay, so that's why it's very important to know about the information of both of them. So how to calculate median? We will practice it also in the tutorial, but to talk about it briefly, first thing to do is sort our data. For finding the mean, it doesn't matter if you order your data or not. But for finding your median is important because you want to find, for example, 160. You want to find the value that 50% of data is smaller than this and 50% are bigger than that. So it's important to order your data in order to find that median. Whenever that's an odd number, this data happen to be exactly in the middle. It's very easy to calculate, but sometimes the sample size is an even number. When it happens, like 160 and 162 happen in the middle, then we usually get the average of these two and say 161 is the median of your data set. So we will talk about also in details in our tutorial. In general format, we can show median as a quantile. So quantile is the general format. I said about 50%. What if I consider 10%? What if I consider 0.002? Then I can define it as quantile and I can calculate it. If it is in terms of percentage, like I show 50% like this, then you can call them percentile. So if it is in terms of ratio like this, like a proportion, then you can call it quantile. But they could be exactly the same, like median. I will show you in this part that they could have the same meaning, but the way you represent them are different. And we name them because time to time when you want to partition your data, you use such terms, especially quartile. Quartile is the time that you partition your data into 4 segments. Then we are interested in 50% of data, whether the data is less than 50% of that, which is median, 25%, and we call it Q1, first quartile, and the third quartile, we show it by Q3. So for median, which is the second quartile, you can also show it by Q2. So Q2 is exactly equal to your median. Okay, so for example, median is 0.5 quantile as a ratio we showed, 50th percentile, so you can also show it as percentage. So 50% of data is less than that. At the same time, 50% is bigger. And the second quartile, yes, you see Q2. So Q1, Q2, Q3, that's the way you partition it in 4 segments. And these notations are important. Please take a look at them. Interquartile range. When we talk about range of data in general, we are talking about maximum of your data minus minimum of your data. So range is not a central criteria. It shows that how your data is distributed around your mean, for example, or median. So here we have a specific type of range, which is called interquartile range. And for that, you use this one. By the way, I should change this part to, because it needs the absolute value in that scenario. So let's write it like this, Q3 minus Q1. This is better because we can show absolute value for it. If we do that, then it doesn't matter if I put Q1 first or Q3, but please use this one, okay? So the interquartile range, because Q3 is always a bigger value than Q1. In the very specific case, they could be exactly equal, but it's not possible that Q1, for example, is bigger than that. And by the way, for detecting outliers in your data, I will show you in the tutorial how we can do it. And as soon as you find the value of IQR, interquartile range, then by a specific multiplication and based on Q1 and Q3, you can find and detect those outliers. And in Viscam boxplot, I will show you exactly how we can do that. All right, in the next video, I will talk about data types, which is very important for your first practical assignment.